Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 11 in the discourse Zois Chukas 5672, and Zois Chukas is the seventh discourse in the overall book B'Shosh Egdimu. So this is class number 11. Today we're also going to begin chapter 28. It's going to be the first class in chapter 28 in the overall book Perek Ches. Okay. So yesterday we discussed the parentheses primarily in chapter 27, in which he differentiates between the state, how in the Orin Sof, how in the infinite light, you have an escalalos, you have a complete integration of two elements. You have the oiros, the lights, the future lights of the Esses Sfirot, of the 10 Sfirot, how they are in a state of escalalos, of integration with the Orin Sof, and that's the meaning of Esses Sfiros Hagnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres, before they are made visible to stand on their own, when they are unified with him. And then, which means before the Tzimtzum, and then comparing that to the Osios, the source of the Kalim. There is the vessels. And the vessels originate as Osios, as lights. As letters. Which letters, and we trace these letters all the way, that the first visibility of these letters is the Rishimu, which after the or gets removed, there is just a trace, and that trace are the letters that are left over. None of the light is left over, just the letters are left over. And these letters that are left over, but these letters exist. If they're left over, means they first were included in the light. So what he differentiated, and we learned yesterday, is a difference between how the light is included in the light and how the letters are included in the light. Both of them obviously are not visible. They're both completely swallowed up in God's infinity. But there's still a difference in them, because the light, which is, as he refers to it, as the oiros hamamala kalam, and the lights that he refers to fills the world, the or pnimi, the internal light. When the or pnimi is included in the or makif, in the encompassing light, since they're both light, which both of them have the same agenda. In other words, in essence, they're the same idea, to express the source, to express God himself. It's just two levels of expression. One of them is an expression without an intended recipient. The other one is an expression with an intended recipient. So obviously, the expression with an intended recipient is far narrower, far more contained, far more controlled expression. But after everything is said and done, they're both an expression of God. That's there. And therefore, their attachment of these two lights are perfect, are in the highest level of attachment. It's like a ray emanating from another ray, which the point of attachment is, and when the first ray is included when the second ray is included in the first ray, it's perfectly included. It doesn't have any other existence other than the first ray. That's how one it is. It's like one thing that incorporates that has it's like two levels of one thing itself, as opposed to the letters, as we learned yesterday. They are not is already an entity. The letters is already an entity. It's not, in other words, the business of the letters is not expression of the source. Quite on the contrary, the business of the letters are kalim, are vessels, and vessels mean something other than source. That's its meaning. Obviously, in this level, it can only be God. There's nothing else other than Him. But the intention of it, the intention is there should be another, not self-expression, but should be another. Therefore, even in its quintessential beginning, it already represents the other. However, it's the state of the other when the other is still a potential in Him. But it's really about the other. And therefore, its connection to the or, when it's swallowed up in the or, is like two things that are bound together, not one entity. That was the idea we learned yesterday. And it was a parenthesis. I mean, we can talk about this more, but it was a parenthesis. So because of that, let's let go of it and let's move onward. Here we go, chapter 28. So now he's going to address, so since we understand that there is, in order to get down to the Or HaKav, as we discussed earlier, to get to the light of the Kav, which the Kav already is a line, which a line is made up of dots, which the dots represent the 10 Sfiros how each one of them is already in order. There's an expression of chachma, then there's an expression of bina, then there's expression of das, and then there is expression of chesed, gevurah, teferes. They're all lining up in a line, which means one comes after the other, which means there's a certain distinguishability between one and the other. In order to get to the spheros, which means it's no more essa spheres agnuzais. Kav is already in there, it's coming out of a state of gonus. Gonus means it's hidden. Here they're coming into a state of expression. In order to get to that, which means the differentiation of these 10 powers, each one as expressed as its own, we need a double tzimtzum. What is the double tzimtzum? First of all, we have to highlight the essa spheres agnuzais, which the essa spheres agnuzais are called gnuzais. Gnuzais means they're hidden because they are lost in the infinite light. So first we have to highlight that darker area, if you might say, in the Or Ein Sof, that is limiting kind of the Or Ein Sof, which wasn't noticed until now because like the tzitzis we learned is min kanaf. It's being that it comes from the talus itself, and it's attached to it. And in this case, it's still absorbed in the source. You don't notice it at all. So you have to create that differentiation. And therefore, that's symptom number one. And that symptom is b'derech siluk. Siluk meaning complete removal of the sphirot ein kates dimension, of the sovev kalalman dimension, of the encompassing dimension, of the infinite light dimension. That has to be completely removed. And then, after that, there needs to be a breakdown in the Or HaKav. In the Essa Spheres Agnuzais, which is a vast cosmic idea. In other words, it's 10 spheros, but it's like one point that includes all 10. And it's like you say, when you have a sentence, you have an idea a richer idea, much more than the letters. And you don't even, if you really understand the sentence, then you don't see the letters. You don't even hear the words. The words are lost in the greater idea. Now you have to start paying attention to the letters, to each word, to each vessel, to each one independently. And obviously, when that happens, the light gets diminished incomparably. It takes a second plunge. But this plunge, as he's going to explain, is only derech miyut. It's a diminishment. It's not a complete removal. This is what we're going to learn now in chapter 28. The tzimtzum. So what we're basically coming up over here is that tzimtzum harishon. What we're usually referring to as tzimtzum harishon. The first tzimtzum is really a double tzimtzum. Has a phase 1 and a phase 2 in it. The tzimtzum that was in the Or Ein Sof, hushenes alam or shebepchenes Ein Sof. Number one, the light that is in a state of Ein Sof, literally Ein Sof. That dimension where you can have spheros ein kates, where you can have without an end attributes, where you can apothesize limitlessly of what types of expressions there can be. So that had to be removed. The limitlessness of it had to be removed. And what's left over is only God in his infinite self is estimating as part of his infinite expression that he can express something definitive. He's estimating the worlds, the 10 spheres, the worlds. Now, what does it mean? So, yeah, the hashara has to become the estimation, the estimated light of that he can narrow his infinite potential to produce 10 particular expressions. That has to be separated from the general power for him to express himself endlessly. The Essa spheres agnuzas, the 10 hidden spheres that are in a state of iskalulus. In other words, the forging itself of these 10 Essa spheres agnuzas, that happens when in the Or Ein Sof he's thinking about creating worlds. There is, as he referred to it earlier, aloy saratzon. He doesn't mention it over here, but earlier the arousal of the will within him to create worlds, to create something particular, to take from his endless potential and to cut out a particular potential. And that's the point. That's the estimation that he's estimating. And now once that happens, he says, what happens is this becomes the lowest level of the Or Ein Sof. These Essa spheres hagnuzais are now the lowest level of the Or Ein Sof. And compared to the Or Ein Sof itself, as we called it, the level A of the Orin Sof, this is only considered a tiny dot. And this entire uh, um, um, the potential for the 10 spheroids is considered just one point. Maybe, I mean, he doesn't say it over here. Maybe it's like the yud. Yud is 10. So because this is like a tiny dot. This is a decimal point from the Orein Seif. A little dot, a little 10, a point that contains 10 potentials, but it's all one potential. Lagabe Orein Seif Abligval. So compared to the Orein Seif Abligval, it's considered only a dot, and this is what he referred to earlier. This is the Malchut level, because it's the final element of the Orin. We learned that earlier, that it's the foot, it's the leg. We learned it's the feet of the Orin. So it's the final, it's the end of the Orin. So just like the feet, we learned will carry you from one dimension to a complete different place. You leave your home, you're going outside. So too for the Orin Sof to leave its infinite place and to present itself as a constructor of worlds, which have definitions, which are built on these 10 powers. That's a movement, that's a quantum leap. And that's what the Malchus does. That's what the foot does. And that's what's all this. That's the point of this one point. And that's why it's called the Malchut. And Malchut also means to be king over something. Kingship means to imply a sovereignty over. So there has to be something to be sovereign over. So it's already a stepping outside, so to speak. However, this is the Malchus of Ein Sof. But that's all to produce this Malchut, to highlight this Nakuda from the pre-Nakuda, where this Esespheres Agnuzais were not even in a sense there. They were just, because it was completely lost in the within the Spheros Ein Kates. There is obviously the potential for 10. Ein Kates means without an end. Without an end, there's also, it includes the potential for 10, but it's not differentiated. When there is an Aloy Saratzon, that kind of highlights that that produces this Nakuda. But this Nakuda is not enough. This Nakuda is still too high for a revelation, because it's all 10, it's like a teacher has a concept, and the student can't reveal that to the student. The teacher has to take the one idea and turn it into an entire semester of classes, in which they're going to deliver first the details, and from the details, after all the details are delivered, after all the specified classes, then the student is going to deduce, so this was the idea, the greater idea. But initially, the teacher can only give him 1 point at a time, like we learned earlier. So that's what he says now. Now we come to the second phase of the tzimtzum. The first Nakuda. Even though this is already a Nakuda, but this is a Nakuda to God. Now, this is not a Nakuda, this is not a point that can reveal, it's not revealable to the creation yet. It's God diminishing and producing for himself a point. But then, from the recipient's end, from the point of creation, this point has to be broken into 10 points. The first Nakuda. In other words, to the creation, we might refer to this as the Keser. The first point is the Keser. Keser is darkness to us, is completely beyond. This is the Malchus of the Ein Sof, is the Keter. We call it Atik. It's the Keter to all the world. It's above the world. The first revelation has to be Chachma. Chachma is already a particular point from the 10 points. The first Nakuda, Shehischel is Galus, that begins to reveal itself La'acharat Tzimtzum, after the Tzimtzum, V'hainu, B'chinas HaRishayna Sheba'es Sphira, is the first level of the 10 Spherois, B'chinas HaChachma. That is the B'china, the element of Chachma. And as he says in parentheses, V'zawat Tzimtzum Beis, and this is the second Tzimtzum, Lias HaChachma, B'chinas Sphira, Pratis B'fnei Atzma, that Chachma should come out as an individual Sphira. That's end of parenthesis. The Nakuda zu, so now this Nakuda, which Nakuda? The Nakuda of Chachma. In order to get to the Nakuda of Chachma, it required 2 tzimtzumim to get to that first, which is the Reishas HaKav. The beginning of the Kav is the Chachma of the Kav. In order to get to this state, you have to have a Nakuda this nekuda is a byproduct of two tzimtzumim. The nekuda zu yesh by base tzimtzumim, it has two tzimtzumim. Tzimtzum echad, the first tzimtzum, hu she'orein soif, that the orein soif baruch hu tzimtzum kol oiroisav, hides. Tzimtzum contracts. What does he mean? He moves away. He removes. He elevates all of his potential back into the source. So he shouldn't be jamming. God doesn't want to jam this particular studio with all the infinite sounds of all the other potential of the Orin Seif. So therefore, Orin Seif tzimtzum kol Seif contracts all of its lights, vehetzel, and emanated rak mibchinas tachtoina sheba'or, only from the lowest level of the light. As he said, and now back to small parenthesis, v'hu b'chinas hashara hanal, and that is that estimation. He's estimating something that a project that he's going to build, which includes all 10 spheres. Shazal Masha Kasov, and that first tzimtzum is what it says, Kulam b'chachma asisa. That even chachma. Now, what he wants to connect that chachma, which is the first revelation, is a byproduct of two tzimtzumim. Of tzimtzum A, that God brings forth the malchus of the Ein Sof. From the Ein Sof itself, God has to produce the malchus of the Ein Sof, which will later be the keter, which will include all the 10. But that itself, for that to be highlighted, that has to be a first tzimtzum by removing all the other Ein Sof. And then from there onward, there's another tzimtzum. But he says, we know in Chassidus, we always hear this. We always say, the Alter Rebbe brings it already in the second chapter of Tanya, in the footnote, Kulam b'chachma asisa, that even chachma is considered asiyah, is considered an action by God. It's just like in a human being, the lowest form of expression, the most nether power of a human being is the power of action, to do something. It's much less than the power of a person to speak, which is much less than a person's power to think, which is much inferior to a person's emotion, which is much inferior to a person's intellect. At these various different levels, action is the final and least and most contracted power of the soul, most insignificant power of the soul. So we say that Chachma, which is the first divine power for creation, is a product only to God. It's only Asiya, only action. So over here, he pinpoints, Gevald, he pinpoints in the Maamor, this is not so much, this is attributed to the higher level of the Tzimtzum Rishon, not the second level of the Tzimtzum Rishon. Meaning, the second part of the Tzimtzum was that Hashem takes the potential 10 lights that he has all wrapped in one and differentiates. If that's all that we were talking, if God himself, if God's light, let me put it this way, if the Orein Sof, to make it understandable, if the Orein Sof would only be Orein Sof B, which means if the extent of Orein Sof would be that it has 10 potentials, that would be the Orein Sof. Then breaking that down to 10, that each one, but they're all together, they're all unified as one giant idea. And then breaking it down to differentiating each power as something individual, that itself would not justify, based on that, we would not say that Chachma is only an Asiya to action. And it wouldn't be an Asiya. It wouldn't be we couldn't say Kulam b'Chachma Asisa. Because then Chachma would be a nice percentage of what was before. Yes, it's cool. If all that Keter has is 10 potentials, and Chachma is just one of it, then Chachma is a piece of Kesed. That's the point. It's a little piece of it. You couldn't dismiss it that it's nothing. When we're saying Kulam b'Chachma Sisa, we want to emphasize that the entire element of Chachma, by the way, which means the entire element of logic, of intelligence and logic, which we feel like we can know God, we can know something through logic, we realize it's absolutely not, it's not the entire logic. I'm talking about divine logic. Is an action to God. It's nothing to God. That means the logic becomes utterly irrelevant in front of Hashem himself. Because it's not even nibbling on anything of God. But that's because, not because of Or Sof B, but that's because of Or Sof A. What does that mean? Since in order even to become a potential for the 10 spheres, in order to produce the SS spheres agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres, which is the level of what we call Or Sof B, Hashem had to remove all of his light and leave over the tiniest droplet, which is the Malchus of the Ein Sof. That is called Asiya. That's his most nether power of the Or Ein Sof. It's still Or Ein Sof, like we discussed. It's the tail end of Or Ein Sof. P'chinas achroina sheba Or Ein Sof. He leaves over just one tiny dot of the Or Ein Sof. And from there, and that dot itself is the keter to all the world. It's the Or. It's considered Ein Sof to all the world, but it's already such a watered down Or Ein Sof, because all he watered it down to one nekuda. And that's the reason why we say on the whole concept of spheres. So when we say that Chachma, then when we say Chachma is only an Asiyah, it's an action to God. We don't only mean Chachma Vatzilus. We mean Chachma on the highest level. Chachma in Adom Kadmon, that Chachma. Chachma as it is in the Kav, the Bereshis HaKav, the beginning of the Kav, which is the Nekuda of Chachma that's in the Kav, that too is Asiyah. Why is it Asiyah? That also Chachma is considered like an action to him. Habilti Balgvul V'Tachlis, the one that is without a limit and without an end. Dahainu, what does that mean? Shegam legabo or vaziv, because not just to Atzmos, not just to the Ma'or, to the source of all light, but even to the light, to the express light of God, which is the Or Ein Sof. Hu b'chinas Asiyah. Again, this is in parentheses. Hu b'chinas Asiyah. It is also Asiyah. It is considered an action to the light, meaning a nothing to the light, not just to the source of the light. And the reason for that is Lefisha Netzla, because it's been Chachma is being emanated mipchinas hayoser tachtoina, from the least element, the most nether element of the Or Ein Sof, shenikra Asiyah derech mashul, which is called action to God. Same idea that he said earlier. That's called the leg, the foot. Most action is considered the realm of the human being that is considered the power of where there is just action. The hands, for example, are more kalim for the intelligence, for you can have intellect, you can do craftsmanship with your hands. But where do you have just pure action? Isn't the feet? You can kick something. You can, even an animal can walk and kick with its legs, can move things. It's the most weakest power, the most unsophisticated power, the most. So the same as the Malchus of the Ein Sof. It's to say that the Or Ein Sof, which was literally limitless, departed and left over one tiny drop, one cell, as you might say, one cell of the Or Ein Sof. That's the Malchus of the Ein Sof. That's the first symptom. Now, within that first symptom, again, this is all in general. We call the symptom Arishon, but what the Rebbe is doing over here is the Rebbe Rashab is that he's showing us that in symptom Arishon there is two symptoms. The first one is the big one, removing the Or Ein Sof and getting down to the Esses Firis Agnuzos, which is only the Malchus of the Ein Sof. And then Tzimtzum HaBeis, and for that reason we say Kulam B'Chachmasis. But Tzimtzum HaBeis, and the second Tzimtzum, who is Shebe Esses Firis Agnuzos, within that point. That's a powerful point. Why is it a powerful point? Because it contains within it all 10 spheros, as they are on such a high level that you can't even define them as they're all lost in a very phenomenal idea of Ein Sof. All the 10 powers are all unified. They're all unified in one idea, all in unity. Even Chachma was not differentiable as Chachma. Was included with the rest of the spheres. That essentially are on a very high level. What does that mean? They're not in a recognizable state of mitzius. You can't You can't define it even as chachma. All it is just, it's like, we discussed earlier, when you take letters of a word and you put those letters together and you create a word, then you're not feeling any more aleph beis, you're not feeling ABC, you're feeling a word, you're feeling something much bigger than the letters. Especially when it's part of a sentence, especially if it's part of a paragraph, which that paragraph, let's say, is the most brilliant idea. So you're not seeing ABC there. You're not seeing letters. All the letters are just lost in something much bigger. There's a great idea over there. And so it is when the all 10 spheres were all unified, is the ginormous idea of all of existence was all overpowering the details. They weren't even recognizable. And it had the great light shining in it. Hanaila, the elevated light. Over here, when he says the elevated light was shining in it, he doesn't mean the elevated. He doesn't mean Orin Sof A. He means Orin Sof B. What does that mean? He means the lower level of the Orin Sof. He means that inside this unified 10 spheres was shining upon them the concept that's in the sentence. Remember, we learned earlier that there's more than that. There's the power that combines the letters. That's hiding in a distance. No. That's not what he's talking about. That's already the first tzimtzum removed that. First tzimtzum removed already that distant, subconscious, superconscious power over here. That was removed in the first tzimtzum. We're talking about even the idea that does express itself in the letters. When all the spheres were together, that greater idea was dominating over here, that you didn't see the individual letters. It had a higher light. That is there when all the spheres are together. And he says in parentheses, just like the light of the intelligence that is enclosed in the word. Which in our point, as you apply that to the spheres, it's the higher intention that God has within the SS spheres, in all the 10 spheres. But when Hashem then emanates chachma, netzla spheres chachma levada. So now comes the second tzimtzum, the second contraction, and Orin Sof B, and it differentiates them, each one individually, and that now becomes the light of the Kav, where you have already 10 points. Each one is already a point. Okay, so these are the two tzimtzumim. That's what he means. And he said earlier that in order to bring about the first nekuda, which is nekuda sachachma, the yud that becomes the yud that contains all of creation, it's not the yud we spoke about earlier. I spoke about a much higher. The Malchus, the Ein Sof Yud, is a much higher Yud. That's a point. That's the point from God's end. God distills His infinite potential to a potential for 10. That's not yet the Yud for creation. That's the Yud of Keser in our case. But then that Yud drops another Yud, a point of a point. That first point is the point of Chacham. That's the beginning of creation. Maybe this is related to, it's explained in many places in Chassidus, that there is 2 levels of ayin. There is yesh and ayin, and the way the system works is there's yesh amiti, there's the ultimate being, which is God Himself, the substance. And then from Hashem, He emanates ayin, He creates nothingness. And then that nothingness is the nothingness, His nothingness, but it's not our nothingness. Then that second nothingness produces, the first nothingness produces another nothingness. So it's a nothing from the nothing. And that second nothingness is the source from where all of creation derives its energy from. Yesh, then comes the world, which is yesh, which is creation. And the way it works is it's yesh from the up down, from God to us. Starts with yesh, the yesh, the real being. Then there is ayin, there is nothing. Then that ayin has a baby, and that's the second ayin. And then from that second ayin comes yesh. And from the bottom up, it works the opposite. Creation, is yesh, something may ayin from nothing. And then that ayin that we're created from nothing, it says in Chassidus, includes within itself 2 levels of ayin. The lower level of the ayin is the ayin of the creation. And then there is a higher level of the ayin, which is the ayin of the yesh amiti, of the true yesh. These are these 2 points over here. There is the higher point, which is the Malchus of the Ein Sof. That itself is called Ayin. It's only Malchus. Malchus is Ayin. It's nothing. To the Ein Sof itself, it's nothing. And then there is the Ayin of Chachma, which is the Reisha Sakav. That's the Ayin. That's the power. That's the first dot that is revealing itself to the creation. And now he explains the difference between these two tzimtzumim, these two powerful contractions. Tzimtzum echad, the first contraction, the first tzimtzum, which means God absorbing the Ein Sof and leaving over just this nether first point, the first ayin, the Malchus of Ein Sof, leaving over the Esespheres Agnuzes, making it a hashara, an estimation on the worlds, all of them all wrapped together, all point. Achatzimtzum echad, the first tzimtzum of B'chinas Siluk, is a complete removal. This alma sa'or, and a complete removal of the light. That means that what's left over is unrecognizable at all to what was before. Because the infinite light complete removes. And it's as if, we're going to see in a moment, that the Esespheres Agnuzos, these 10 hidden spheres, are like a new Beria. It's like a complete new creation. It's like a Yesh Me'ayin. No, you can't even compare it at all to what was before. Even though it was literally included in the Ein Sof, but now that it's a potential for 10 spheres, that means you have already some element, some taste in it, some subtle coloring, some element. It's unrecognizable to what was before. And that now is where you made the ultimate leap, the quantum leap from Ein Sof to something, in a sense, is when God produces the first dot, the Malchus of Ein Sof. It's like Yesh Me'ayin, but in our case, as we discussed it, it's making from Yesh, from real substance, making Ayin, making nothing. It's something totally new. But then the Tzimtzum Abayz, the second Tzimtzum, is when that first dot produces the second dot, which is Chachma. That is a powerful Tzimtzum, but that's not a siluk. It's not a complete removal. It's only a miyut. It's only a reduction. Tzimtzum Abayz, and the second Tzimtzum, B'chinas miyut levad, is only a miyut. That means the relationship of the 10 revealed spheros, the light of the kav, and then eventually the or that's going to illuminate all the 10 spheros, the spheres of Atzilus, their relationship to the Esespheres Agnuzos is that they are a minuscule something of, they're very, very reduced, but it's not a quantum separation. There's still a piece of what once was. And therefore we can't say on them real yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, because they are part of what was. It's called, it's not ein aroch, as we discussed earlier. This is the main point that he's explaining over here, as we're going to discuss in tomorrow's class. We'll stop over here. Based on this, he's going to explain how Chachma, and even the oir of Chachma, not the Caleb, the lights of the spheres, how they are both, is Chachma, because that was the big question we asked at the beginning of the discourse, going back a few discourses ago. We asked, is Chachma yesh me'ayin to God, to the Orient, not to God, of course, to God, but to the Orient self, is Chachma yesh me'ayin, or is Chachma Gilo Yahelim? Is it just a revelation of what a potential that was concealed now revealing itself? And his answer is going to be, we're going to see tomorrow, depends to what level of the Orient Sof. To Orient Sof B, it's Gilo Yahelim. To Orient Sof A, which over there we say Kulna B'Chachma Asisa, it's as if it's Yesh Me'ayin, not just as if, it's Yesh Me'ayin, completely, totally no. So not even Kalim. Kalim are for sure, the vessels are for sure Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing. But even the Or, which does have a relationship with the primordial light, depends which level of the primordial light. To the nether, to the Malchus of the Ein Sof, it was there, but it was hidden in a greater light, but it was there. And now it only became differentiated, it became expressed. But to the deeper level of the Ein Sof, that was removed, but derech siluk, for that, in relationship to it, it's considered completely new. It's nothing, absolutely nothing. And this is where he's going to continue, Be'ezus Hashem, in tomorrow's class.